Oh, okay. Your show. I'm going to let you run it.
Hello, everyone. This is Marley Dias, founder of the 1000 Black Girl Books campaign, and I am here with
Melissa Harris Perry, and I am editor-at-large at ELLE.com.
So this is going to be our conversation in which we will be having an interview and then getting into a conversation about whatever topics we'd like.
Absolutely. Lots of things for us to talk about. And I am really excited to get a chance to chat with you. We sort of just missed each other down at the Essence Festival. Mm-hmm. You came just as I was leaving, but we both got a chance to talk with Ava about Queen Sugar and some other things. So we have lots to talk about today.
Mm-hmm. So I want to know what your favorite Black Girl book was as a child, and if you got to read them.
You know, I did get to read some Black girl books as a child, but you know, I will tell you that actually my very favorite one is one that wasn't published, it wasn't produced. It was a book that was made for me, actually hand stitched for me by my godmother. I hate that I don't have it physically with me, but my godmother made for me a book when I was just 2 years old. And it was the 70s, so it was made from a lot of fabric, kind of from the 70s, and she had images, pictures of a black girl with braids, and this black girl did all kinds of different things in it, and she also wanted to teach me to like zip things and tie things, so it had like activities you could do. I still have that book. My own 2-year-old now has it. My older daughter had it, but it was easily my favorite book. And it was called like the I Can See, Do, and Read book. But I loved it because it felt special to me. And the little black girl that was in it, I always felt like it was a book about me. Later, I loved Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. It was, you know, that's obviously a classic. And then, you know, as a much later reader, it was when I really discovered Toni Morrison. And I was talking about Toni Morrison's writing last night, but both Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston became very, very important writers to me when I became an adult reader.
That's great. So what did you want to be when you were 11? Did you want to be a writer, a flight attendant, a doctor, actress?
At 11, you know, I'm not sure I remember at 11. By 13, I wanted to be a psychiatrist. I remember that very well. Maybe around 11 or 12, I think maybe I wanted to be an archaeologist. I remember when they found King Tut's tomb, that I thought that's what archaeology was, and I thought it would be really cool to go and discover and find things. I found out later how patient you had to be, and that you would have to sit for hours and sift through, and I thought, oh no, I'm simply not that patient.
I wanted to be, from the time that I was 5 till I was 7, I wanted to be a forensic detective. Really?
And what is it about being a forensic detective that was interesting?
So I always had questions about things, whether I knew the answer or not. I was always double checking, and then I realized that if you're a forensic detective, you get to incorporate science also with writing and asking questions.
Oh, I love that. Are you still thinking that that's what you like to do?
Well, I want to be a magazine editor, so I am working on a special project with ELLE.com that will hopefully make my dream come true.
I love that. There are so many things that you said about being a forensic detective that actually are like being a magazine editor, asking questions, you know, delving in deeply. I actually think that magazine work is, and in fact, journalism of all kinds is a lot like being a detective.
It is. So I've always had writing, like, even though, and when you say you're going to be a detective, in your job description it might not say that you have to know all these things about writing, but you technically do, because you have to be able to have words to express what you're trying to tell to the person when you're trying to figure out information. You have to be able to report down these things, whether it's through technology. You still have to know how to write, whether you're using pen and paper or a computer.
So what books are you working on reading this summer?
Well, actually, I have started my summer reading, but I'm going back to like books that I tend to mention that I don't always have the time to read. So there's a lot of books like that are for ages like 3rd grade to 4th grade. But in 3rd grade to 4th grade, they came out this year, and I wasn't able to read them because it would be too easy, and I felt like I didn't think I needed to really to read them. And now that I'm in an audience that's elementary school kids and early middle school kids, I have to read these books because I can't reflect their experiences without knowing what they've been through and what books that they like to read.
That's right. So, it's one of those things publishers talk about all the time, that young people read up, right? So most young people tend to read sort of even 2 or 3 grades. You want to read about characters that are actually 2 or 3 grades older, but there can be something interesting actually about going back and reading things that are about people younger, and that might even be easy for you to read, but it can give you an opportunity to go back and reflect on those experiences.
Exactly.
Anything in particular that's interesting from those earlier texts?
Well, Roll Thunder, Hear My Cry is obviously one of my favorite older books, which is kind of annoying because it's a black girl book, and the Shallow series is a book about a white boy and their dog, which is a fantastic story. Both of them equally great. But the thing is that they've both been around for around the exact same time, and only one of them really gets into school systems, which is the Shiloh series. So it is upsetting. But
people may not know, if they're watching on Facebook Live, about the white boy and his dog reference that you just made. So maybe you can tell folks a little bit about that in case they don't know.
So I started the 1,000 Black Girl Books campaign. So in my 5th grade class, I wasn't seeing books where black girls were the main characters. So I decided to start a project in which I was going to collect 1,000 books where black girls were the main characters and give them to a school in Jamaica that my mother attended. I was able to complete that, and I've given to 5 other cities, and in total have collected 7,000 books.
Which is an extraordinary thing.
It's a big number.
It's a big number. One of the things I hear people say about that effort and others like it is this idea that we need images that represent us. Sometimes people will say you can't be a thing unless you can see a thing, right? They'll say you can't be it unless you can see it. I'm not sure I believe that.
I don't necessarily believe that either. There's always an exception to the rule, and I feel like in that case you can be something that you can't see. It's the whole thing I think about that is that it kind of takes away the idea of community. Because you could know about how to be a forensic detective, and I've never seen or read a book about a forensic detective. And then you have that information that you're able to pass on to me. So I feel like it kind of breaks up the community effort that you really need to be successful, because no one is successful by themselves. So I do think that when I talk about black girl books, I don't have a specific career or thing that needs to be, just has to be a black girl that's the main character. So if you can't be what you can't see, I feel like you can be a black girl and not be reflected, but you just have a stronger sense of identity and more likely to be more confident if you're able to see yourself reflected in books. So I feel like the community effort can change. You can't be what you can't see.
I thank you. I really appreciate you reflecting on that. My college mentor was Dr. Maya Angelou. And one of the things that she always said to us as students was, she would say, when people do awful things, don't call them monsters. Because they're not monsters, they're human. And it's important to recognize that anything that a human being can do, you can do. Which means the worst thing that a person can do is inside of you as well. But that's also true for the best thing that a human can do. And so if a white man has done an amazing thing, that's inside of you too. You could do that amazing thing. So we don't call people who have done terrible things monsters. We also don't presume that the greatest thing that a person can do is outside of ourselves, right? So I love the way that you reflected on that idea of community. It is so important to have these images, but it's not like if we never see it, like we don't have the creative capacity still to become it. Yeah, I think that's important. So tell me then, if you are thinking about these kinds of books, what kinds of books that don't exist yet would you like to see written? If you could start imagining the kinds of stories that you'd love to have told. Is it fantasies? Is it science fictions? Is it actual like historical novels that we don't have yet? What kinds of books would you love to be able to read?
Well, actually, there is an interesting one that I have two ideas.
Okay.
So one would just be about a person who hates reading, completely hates reading. It would be a long book about a person who hates reading, and it wouldn't. They would, in the end, hopefully, they would still hate reading, but it would show because people think that I'm like, oh, if someone doesn't like reading, then I'm automatically judging them. Like, no, if you don't like reading, you don't have to like what I like. I'm just saying for those who like that, and for those who feel that they're not reflected, I'm able to do that for them. So I think that I would probably write a story about like the reverse of what I do, and like, because I think it's kind of interesting to do something new and interesting instead of something that you would predict me to do. I would write a book about a black girl, probably a black girl who doesn't like to read, or it could be, yeah, it'll obviously be a black girl. But I really do want to write a graphic novel. I don't draw, but I think that it's important for people who don't have a good sense of imagining and a good sense of sensory detail, because no matter how much an author writes, no matter how much detail, no matter how scripted, for some people, it's not going to work. And it's fine. I'm completely fine with that. And I think it's important to use graphic novels because they can be for little kids and they can be for adults. So I think that it's important to have that in the mix as well. And I also would like to write about a person who is kind of like Rosa Parks, but did it before her. So there was actually, I don't recall her name, but there was a woman who actually was able to do what Rosa Parks did before, but she did not live in a traditional family. She was pregnant as she was young, so people didn't tell her story because they didn't feel like, Claudette Cloven, so they didn't feel like they could reflect her story because she wasn't a good example, even though technically she did something and she did it better because she was by herself. So I think that it would be interesting to write a story about that because I feel like it's not told and it's not fair because other people, more people are likely not to reflect with her than they are to other people. Her difficult story and then her being able to stand up and then her getting no pleasure or no rights or no glory, not saying that she needs it, but just glory for doing something so amazing and so brave like that. I think that would be an interesting story to write.
Today is a hard day for a lot of people.
Yes.
And I think for some folks they'd say it's not even an appropriate topic to talk about with a young person, but I feel like it impacts young people. So, have you, I know your mother's traveling with you. Have you all talked about the difficult videos that so many people are talking about in terms of the officer-involved shootings? I'm wondering how you're feeling, if you're talking to your friends about it, how you're feeling in a moment like this.
So it's really sad to talk about, and I really kind of don't want to, but it's difficult, and I don't want to talk to my friends about it.
Yeah, it's sad. It's really hard.
Hard things come and go, but it seems like racism always stays.
I wonder if reading and thinking helps us. Are there things that we can read that help us? I know for me, I turn a lot of times to poetry. Like sometimes when I'm feeling so bad I can't get through a whole book, if I just can't even concentrate all the way. So a lot of times in a moment like this, I'll turn to poetry. Like I'm like, okay, I need some Maya Angelou, or I need some Nikki Giovanni, or I need somebody who will help me just like process a little bit in, either anger or just to kind of like. Are there things that you read when it hurts that help a little bit?
Well, I actually, when I'm hurting, I try not to read. I try to just stay in solitude, but otherwise I think that poetry is great. And the first book that I actually ever had a challenge reading was Brown Girl Dreaming by Jacqueline Woodson, which is one of the books that I always like to talk about during my campaign because it's always touched me, because I've been an avid reader and it was the first book that I ever couldn't understand at all. So it's always kind of been in my mind, and it's kind of shown me that I don't have to be my best, I just have to try my best. So
I just finished a book by Shonda Rhimes called The Year of Yes.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, Shonda Rhimes is the showrunner and creator of
Scandal,
Grey's Anatomy, all of this. Apparently, when she was a young girl, she was a big reader. She
had to be. She wouldn't have been anywhere
without her
reading.
books. And every time she felt bad or good or anything, she always was reading. She's also from a big family and was the youngest, and apparently this is part of how she just kind of dealt with everything. At some point, I would love to see you and Shonda Rhimes sit down and have an interview. I feel like you guys would have a lot to talk about. That's just my pitch for a Marley and Shonda Rhimes conversation, because I think you guys would have a lot to talk about being a black girl who reads, and it's made her quite a good writer. And I feel like someday you'll undoubtedly be running.
Yeah, so she was at the United States of Women, and I spoke at that summit as well. And then she was at Black Girls Rock, and I was at Black Girls Rock, and she got honored and received an award at Black Girls Rock. So I feel like we've always been in the same situation because we both reflect diverse cast and diverse characters, but we've never kind of met professionally, which would be a great opportunity to have.
Yeah, y'all are clearly like 1 degree of separation, so it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I can't wait to see it happen. What can I tell you? What would be helpful or useful, or what questions do you have for me?
I just want to know something that people most likely wouldn't know about you.
So, some people may know this, but I bet most people don't know that I am an avid gardener. Like, I have a gardening problem. Like, really from about mid-April until about November, I don't come inside. So, I come up here to New York, when I have work to do for ELLE.com or other things, but mostly I live in North Carolina. And we have 1.5 acres of land, and I have tomatoes, I have squash, I have pumpkins, I have strawberries, I have kale, I have sunflowers, I have roses, and I sometimes out there 8 hours, to the point where like my husband and my daughters are like, will you please just come inside? And I am just out there with my hat and my hands in the dirt. And so like sometimes people are emailing and I am not coming inside because I am just out there. And every morning, usually about 5 in the morning when I'm up, the first thing I do is go out to the garden. And my bet is that most people don't know that about me. Unless maybe if you follow me on social media, every once in a while you will see like a squash picture or a tomato picture, because I'm obsessed with my garden. So, and I feel like I learn a lot about gardening, because one of the things about gardening is in the winter, everything looks dead. And when you look at it, you think, nothing could possibly be alive here. You're looking at the ground, and it's hard, and it's cold, and there's nothing there. And gardening is my, it's my actual, like, faith practice. Like, even more for me than church or prayer or anything else. Because it really, everything looks gone in the winter. And then it starts coming back. And even when it starts coming back, you think, and this is not going to make it. This is not going to work out. And like, then I'll be gone maybe for a week. I'll be traveling. And then come back. And like the tomatoes are 3 feet high. And then, like I'll come back, and sometimes overnight if it rains, the squash will go from being a flower to being an actual squash. Probably when I get back, my pumpkin, which was green, I bet when I get back in 4 days, it's gonna be orange. And I'm not doing that. I'm not actually out there. I mean, I go out there and I do things, but it's mostly that life keeps regenerating and keeps coming back. And as long as you are willing to work with it, it will come back. And it's that's why I garden, and that's why I love it, because it really is it's a practice of faith, and that for me is really where I do my work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marley. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Do you guys want to take a couple of questions from the audience?
I would love to take some questions from Facebook. What do we have out there in the world?
Let's see. Okay. Derek Barnes wants to know, this is back to your Black Girl Books movement, how can we now transfer this ultra-successful drive to pressure large publishing houses to publish more books with children of color as protagonists?
Oh, that's a great question.
That's a great question, but actually interesting fact is that publishing houses actually do publish these books, and they do make these books, and these books do well, but they don't get in school. So it's not actually the writers or the publisher's fault. They do everything in their power to produce these books, and I think that they're doing a fantastic job, from Simon & Schuster to Scholastic to Penguin to Aladdin. All of it is amazing, and I think that people always forget that because it kind of gets confused because you don't see them in the place where you expect them to be. So it really is school systems and school districts that kind of create a way for new books and diverse books to not get in. So there's books that we call the classics that are separated from every other book because maybe they've been around for the longest amount of time. Maybe they have something that's so traditional and so easy to explain. But normally, I wouldn't say that when you write a book where a black girl is the main character, our experiences can sometimes be more difficult to understand for other people.
Got it.
Because the traditional people that have kind of created these systems, they have not experienced that. So it's kind of touchy. Like when you talk about religion, and you talk about sexism, and you talk about racism, which are all things that happen to black girls and are put in stories because sometimes it's our experiences. They're not put in there because I feel they might be too touchy of a subject.
So I wonder if if the books are being produced, if they exist, and the problem is adoption in schools, then maybe part of what we need is clear curricular guides that go along with the books so that school systems have a way of adopting the books along with it. If we're presuming that schools are, that they're good-hearted, that they want to adopt them, I mean, which is an assumption, but I'm going to start with a kind of good assumption here, right? That maybe part of what publishing houses can do is to work with, for example, education programs at top universities that can say, okay, here are the great books that exist, right, with black girl characters, and let's do a set of companion curricular guides that can go right along with them so that schools can do a better job of adopting them. Yeah. Love that.
That sounds good.
I think you kind of covered just our next question, but I'm going to see if you have anything to add. What still shocks you about discrimination today, and what are your thoughts about education in the U.S. today, which is kind of a good segue since you were just talking about it.
Oof. Okay, well, my thoughts on education in the U.S. today, I think that for me, I've had a great education, not just from my parents, but from my school, but I feel like they don't indulge in what kids want to learn. They make us, so in my 6th grade experience, I had a great 6th grade. It was a lot of fun. I did good in school. I got all A's and 1 B, but that was because I missed 35 days of school this year. So,
off doing other educational experiences.
Having other educational experiences.
Right. Never let school get in the way of your education. That's right.
So I think that the reason that it kind of stops people from having a good education and for not doing their best is that we sit there for 7 hours every day and we just hear noise. We go to another class. We sit there for an hour. We hear a bell. We go. We eat lunch that isn't actually nutritional. We go. We take another class. We go. We take a test and we feel stressed out and we feel difficult and we try our hardest and then we come home and we have 5 hours of homework to do. So I think that it's good, but I don't feel that there's any polls or any say in what the students get to do because I know people who are on student council. I know one of my friends, he was president for our school and he was not able to change anything.
Right.
Just because we have a selection and he has to make up the speech and he has to give out apples with his face on it. He didn't have anything that he could say to the principal that was getting bypassed by their teacher that was advising it.
Right.
So it's just like you don't want to create these faux things for us to put our votes in, and for us to consider who our true friends are and who we want to be representing our school, and then not allow us to have those choices and say as to what happens.
I think, what you just said is this. It's the same thing that my college students say to me. So I teach at Wake Forest University, and I mean that the importance of democracy, of self-governance, of people having a voice in the institutions that they're part of. So whether that's where you work or where you go to school, the idea that people have a right to say some part of it. Now, granted, it doesn't mean that where I work, I get to choose everything, right? There's parts of my job that I don't want to do. I gotta close my fiscal year by July 1, right? All of us have some things we don't want to do, but we have a right? We want to have a say in part of what we learn, what we do, how we create, and if we presume that school is in part about learning to become citizens, learning to become part of the great project of self-governance, which is what the Great American Project is supposed to be about. You should practice, right? You should practice in grade school, middle school, college, actually having the right to voice your opinion and have an actual say in what you're doing. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, and there are some schools that are starting to experiment with that, and I actually think, I think that's such an important insight. Yeah, it's really important.
Do you want to take a couple more?
Yeah, let's do it.
Aaliyah says, what are your thoughts about Oprah Winfrey and the success of the OWN network? And would this young lady consider working with Oprah Winfrey on a writing deal if it were available?
I would say yes, if the opportunity were given to me. I say this a lot of times when I give my opinion on things. I'm not looking for it, but if it comes upon me, I will definitely consider it. I'm not saying Oprah hit me up. I'm just saying
Oprah hit me up.
Yeah. I'm just saying that having that opportunity would be grateful. But if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to be sitting in my bed and being sad.
Yep.
So I think that it would be great because Oprah does a lot of things for black women, and I feel like she represents them greatly, and she has a big influence as to what people do and say. So I think that it's cool what she does. But I mean, I'm 11, so I don't get to, the topics she discusses are not really for kids. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think that she has a great network. She works with great people who make great content. That's amazing. So yeah,
exciting.
Okay, one more.
Mm-hmm.
Adriana says she would like to know what social issues would you illustrate on one of your books?
Ooh. So, okay, social issues. Well, obviously, in itself, the Rosa Parks story would illustrate that if you're different or if you're not what you want everyone to see, then you can't be seen. Like that should not be a statement that anyone should say. If you're not perfect, if you're not what everyone expects to see a girl who's changing the world, then you shouldn't be allowed to show your face. So I think that would be something that would be addressed in that. And for the girl who doesn't like reading, I would think it would just show that you can be what you want to be, but when people are giving you resources, there's no need to shut them down. Mm-hmm. So it's just that she can, if she doesn't want to read, she that's fine, and that's perfectly fine, but she still has to understand that she has a community around her that's willing to support her, because I know that people get on a lot of people who don't like to read or aren't good at reading, and I think that would just be like, you have a community to support you, all your choices are optional, there are things you have to do, but there's things you don't have to do.
Exactly. I love it. All right. Any other big questions coming through for us? I have so much enjoyed chatting with you. I'm so excited that you are at ELLE.com and hanging out with us and working on your special project. And it has just been a pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. All right. Thanks for joining us on
Thank
Facebook.
You.